Who knew a little phone like this could generate such conversation? But yet here it is, the iPhone SE for 2022. Hey, what's up to all my Luscious fans? Steve Alicious here. And we're going to talk about, this is the initial kind of first couple of days, how we're doing review. It's setting us up for the full week review, as I have put my SIM in this. You know, I usually carry around an iPhone 13 for personal stuff, family stuff, work stuff, iPhone 13 Pro. Took the SIM out of that, put it in this guy, and I can tell you for the first day or so, really not missing a whole heck of a lot. And we'll talk a lot about that. And I think part of the reason why this phone generates so much conversation and hate and confusion is because it really doesn't have a peer. And when we can't put things in boxes, when we can't put things in kind of a mold, we short circuit. Our brains don't work quite right, and we have these reflexive reaction. We just say, no, we don't understand, so we make fun of it, or we hate it, or we get angry about it, because it's a confusing device for sure. It has DNA of a budget device, and also has mid-range device, but it has these flagship features and performance that we just can't handle in a form factor from a few years back. So that, I think, is lends to a bit of it. And when people talk about the $429 price tag and how this phone should be $200, well, Dave 2D said it best the other day. I think he was talking about the Mac Studio when he said, when Apple comes out with a pricing for something, with a price, the initial reaction is always shock and outrage. How could they possibly charge that kind of money for a device like this? But when you sit down and you calm down and you think about all the things that they offer and the way they offer it and to who they're offering it to, it starts to make sense. So let's talk about the iPhone SE 2022 from that standpoint. The first thing, I'm going to address this right off the top, and then I'm not going to address it again. The comments that I've been seeing is, whoa, how could they? You could get a Xiaomi that could do all of this for $300. That's not this customer. The person who's thinking about the iPhone SE isn't going on AliExpress and buying the import $300 Xiaomi that in a couple of years isn't going to be running that well, if you can even get it running on the bands in the United States properly. This is a phone for people who want to be in the Apple ecosystem, who want a device that's not necessarily $1,000, $700 plus, but they want something that's going to last them, that's going to be supported for 5, 6, 7 years, and run well. And the thing about Apple devices is they do a fantastic job of optimizing the experience across multiple devices, across multiple generations. So, in a way, that hurt them for a while, because you had phones that were 2 and 3 years back, and every year was hard to tell the difference because the experience was always the same, which has its clear benefits for a lot of people who just want a phone that just works as a device and who want Touch ID, who don't mind the older design. And you could sit there and cry about the older design and the bezels and all the rest of it. I never really worried about that. The only time bezels really annoyed me was when they were asymmetrical. That just threw me off because it's like an OCD thing. But regular bezels, you're not looking at the bezels, you're looking at the screen. And a lot of people will rag on and harp on this 720p thing. Something you have to understand. The 720p that they'd be comparing this to is usually those dim, cheap panels on Android devices that are 720p spread across 6.5-inch displays. That looks bad, where you could sit there and you could count pixels. On a 4.7-inch display, especially one of this quality, the LCD, it looks fantastic. Really not an issue, and especially when you have the rich saturation, the color, just really the depth of the color, brightness. You can see it right there. It's just a fantastic looking display. And Apple has always punched well above its weight in terms of displays, even going back to the 90s PowerBooks. If you look at those active matrix displays that they used to put on those laptops, always light years ahead of what everyone else was offering. So when you talk about, wow, it's the same display as the iPhone, whatever, yeah, but they were ahead of the time then. This LCD panel, trust me, at $429 looks a heck of a lot better than some of the budget offerings you're going to see in the $350 range. Build quality's flagship. You look at the back, you got glass, aluminum frame, solid device, good weight to it. Always things that you're going to like there from Apple. That hasn't changed whatsoever. Performance is an A15. And this is where it starts to get confusing. Because you look at the device and then you start using it. You're like, this is silky smooth. Pokemon Go is great. Gaming's great. Everything that you're going to want to do on this device is going to run really well. And you're going to enjoy it. It's just a fantastic experience. Going through the OS, moving stuff around. You find yourself not missing a heck of a lot of the features from the higher end flagships. Because you could get so much out of this device. And as consumers, we have a tendency to grossly overestimate what we actually need out of phones. And when you bring it down to a device like this and you strip it down to the bare essentials with great internals, you realize that. You get to understand, geez, all these bells and whistles that we were trained to go after and just drool over. When you break it down to the functions of what you're going to use a phone for, making calls, text, Twitter, Facebook, gaming, Instagram, web browsing, all the stuff, weather, check, 99% of the experience is here in a $429 package. And that's why this is the eighth best-selling phone in the world, something like that. Because there's a majority of people out there who recognize that and just want this phone for what it is. It's a great way into the Apple ecosystem to get the same experience as everybody else without paying an arm and a leg. And that's what you get with this. So there's absolutely a place for this device. Let's talk about the camera. It's been good so far. I'm going to take better images throughout the course of the week, but you can see here, people want to see a black cat. They always ask how a camera handles a black cat. Well, there you go. There's a picture of Xavi there. By the way, channel membership's open. Get your Xavi emoji down below. But the camera's good. It's a single lens, sure, but it does a heck of a lot better than a lot of budget devices would. Nice, sharp images, good contrast, all the rest of it. Touch ID. Fantastic to have back. And I can tell you, I understand that they released iOS 15.4 for the iPhone 12 and 13 to allow mask Face ID. I used it the other day. Didn't work that well. And if you change your glasses, you got to reset it up and all the rest of it. This works. You're outdoors, you're wearing a mask, whatever it happens to be. Your hands you can't quite get your face. Boom. Hit it. Works every time. Touch ID should be back on all the devices in some form. You miss it. It's fantastic. And I really now, when I go back to my iPhone 13 Pro, I'm going to miss having Touch ID on it. Battery life. Okay. So far, so good. A bunch of people were saying, it'd be 2 hours. I'm going to get 5 hours on this thing. A screen on time. And that's going to be well above, or at least in the ballpark of what you'd imagine the users of this phone are going to want. That'll absolutely get you through the day. Because don't forget, you're only pushing, the A15 is incredibly power efficient. It's a 2,000 milliamp hour battery, I get that. But you're only pushing 720p on that 4.7 inch LCD. So there are efficiencies to be had there. And it certainly relates so far as battery life. It's going to be the best of the SEs in terms of battery life. And then there's the support, where this is going to be running and supported and get updates and get new features. You feel like LeBron James when he went to the Heat. Not 1, not 2, not 3. It's going to be 5 or 6 years that this device is supported. And like Ron Popeil, set it and forget it. If you're somebody who just wants this phone, you're not an enthusiast, you just want an Apple phone, your grandkids have Apple phones, your daughter has, whatever it happens to be, you just like the Apple ecosystem, but you don't like spending $1,200. You get a fantastic experience, you get entrance into that, and your pass is good for 5 or 6 years, so you don't have to worry about your phone. You buy it, you spend this money, you're going to enjoy it. It's a fantastic build quality, all the rest of it, and the performance for $429. When you add all of that up, it makes sense. So the initial sticker shock, you'd be like, oh, how is that? But inconceivable. But when you calm down, you look at what you get, even though it's confusing, you can't put it in a box, or there's no mold for this phone, and that's part of the problem. But when you break it down piece by piece, this phone makes sense. And so far, so good. If you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, LongIslandWatch.com. Have that Steve-alicious day.